On March 15, 2004, four college students left Phoenix, Arizona, heading to San Diego for spring break. None of them ever came back. For 14 long years, their families lived with the unbearable agony of not knowing what had happened to their children. Then, in October 2018, something completely unexpected changed everything. One of the missing students sent a message from a brand new Facebook account, but what that message said was so disturbing that it took authorities months to decide whether to make it public. What had really happened to these four friends during all those years, and why was only one of them able to send that message? Phoenix, Arizona's second-largest city, had always been known for its vibrant student life. In 2004, Arizona State University alone hosted over 50,000 students, many of them from working-class families, juggling part-time jobs to pay for their education. Back then, the internet was slowly becoming more accessible, but social media hadn't yet taken over daily communication. Most students relied on cell phones, and text messages cost money that many couldn't afford. The four main characters of this story had met during their first semester in the School of Engineering in August 2003. Ryan Thompson, 19, was the most outgoing of the group. He came from a family of small business owners in downtown Phoenix, with the kind of natural charisma that drew people to him. His wide smile and easygoing humor made him the life of every gathering. Michael Carter, also 19, was his opposite. Quiet, thoughtful, and serious. He had grown up in a small rural town in northern Arizona called Holbrook. For him, Phoenix was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to build a better future. His family had made big sacrifices to send him to college, even selling some of their cattle to pay his first year's tuition. Then there was Chris Miller, 20, the oldest and most mysterious. He came from a well-off family in the suburbs of Scottsdale, but there was always tension in his home. His parents had divorced when he was 15, leaving him with a more reserved, guarded personality. Despite his financial security, Chris worked weekends at an auto repair shop, not because he needed the money, but because he said he liked working with his hands. The fourth friend was David Collins, 19, originally from Yuma. Athletic and disciplined, David had played football in high school and still carried himself like a team captain. He often acted as the peacemaker when tempers flared among his friends. He had a girlfriend back in Yuma, Jessica, and their long-distance relationship meant frequent 4-hour bus trips whenever he could afford the time. By the spring semester of 2004, the four had become inseparable, studying together in the library, hanging out in the campus cafe, and slowly forming plans for a spring break getaway. It was Ryan who first suggested a trip to San Diego, insisting that after months of hard work, they deserved a few days at the beach. Chris managed to borrow his father's 1999 red Honda Civic for the trip. It wasn't fancy, but it was reliable and had enough room for all of them. Michael had been saving money from his part-time job at an electronics store, and David's parents had given him some extra cash as a reward for his good grades. The plan was simple. Leave early Monday morning, March 15th, drive the 6 hours to San Diego, stay at a budget hotel near the beach for 5 nights, and return on Saturday, March 20th. They booked rooms at the Ocean View Inn, a modest but clean place just 2 blocks from the boardwalk. The total cost was steep for college kids in 2004, but they had scraped it together. On Sunday, March 14th, each of them said goodbye to their families, promising to return the following weekend. Ryan had dinner with his parents in their Midtown Phoenix home. His mother reminded him to bring his ID, keep some emergency cash, and stay in touch. "San Diego's beautiful," she said, packing him sandwiches for the road. "But don't forget to call us." Michael phoned his parents from the payphone at his boarding house. The call lasted only 5 minutes, but he promised to check in from the beach. His father, a man of few words, reminded him to manage his money carefully and be back on time for Monday classes. Chris spent the afternoon at his mother's house in Scottsdale. The usual tension filled the air, especially with his father expecting to see him that weekend. His mother asked repeatedly if the trip was really necessary. "Your father wanted to spend time with you," she said as he packed his backpack. Chris explained that the trip was already planned and his friends were counting on him. David drove to Yuma that afternoon to say goodbye to Jessica. She wasn't thrilled about the idea of him spending a week in San Diego. "That place is wild," she said as they walked through downtown Yuma. David promised her he'd behave and bring her a souvenir. Their last phone call was at 9:30 that night, after he had already driven back to Phoenix. On Monday, March 15th, the weather was perfect. The four friends met at 7 a.m. at Chris's house, where the car was parked and ready. Ryan showed up first, carrying a cooler full of food and drinks his mother had packed. Michael arrived 5 minutes later looking nervous but excited. It was his first time going to the beach. David came last, lugging a sports bag and at the last minute, a guitar he decided to bring along. Chris had filled the gas tank the night before, checked the oil and water, and cleaned the car inside and out. A folded road map sat in the glove compartment just in case. At 7:30 a.m., the four friends climbed into the red Honda Civic. Chris was driving. Ryan sat in the passenger seat, while Michael and David settled into the back. The last confirmed image of them came from a security camera at a gas station along Interstate 8 near Gila Bend, Arizona. The timestamp on the footage showed March 15th, 2004, at 9:47 a.m. It captured Chris filling the tank while the other three bought sodas and snacks inside the convenience store. Ryan looked relaxed, joking with the cashier. Michael seemed a bit tired, probably from not sleeping much the night before, too excited about the trip. David studied the map while munching on a bag of chips. The cashier, a man named Steven Ramirez, would later recall how happy and carefree the young men had seemed. "You could tell they were college kids," he said in his statement to the sheriff's department. "They asked me about the best route to San Diego and if there was a good place to grab breakfast along the way. I told them there was a diner in Yuma worth stopping at." At 10:05 a.m., the red Honda pulled out of the gas station. That was the last confirmed sighting of the four friends alive. When they didn't return on Saturday, March 20th, as promised, their families initially assumed the boys had simply decided to extend their trip. It wasn't unusual for college students to change plans, especially during spring break. But when they didn't show up for classes on Monday, March 22nd, the worry began to grow. Ryan's mother, Mary Ellen, was the first to act. On Tuesday, March 23rd, after calling her son's cell phone repeatedly with no answer, she reached out to the other families, only to discover none of the parents had heard from their kids since the night before the trip. Chris's family moved the fastest. His father, a civil engineer with connections in the state government, managed to get the Arizona State Police to open a preliminary investigation that same Tuesday. But the initial response was disheartening. "They're young adults," the officer said. "They have the right to go wherever they want. Until 72 hours have passed since their last contact, we can't classify them as officially missing." By Wednesday, March 24th, all four families gathered for the first time at Chris's parents' house. The meeting was tense and emotional. Mary Ellen cried constantly. Michael's parents, who had driven in from Holbrook, looked lost and overwhelmed in the big city. David's parents arrived later that afternoon from Yuma, bringing Jessica, David's girlfriend, who insisted he would never have extended the trip without telling her. Together, the families pieced together everything they knew. All agreed the original plan was to return on Saturday, March 20th. None of the boys had mentioned staying longer. Michael had a part-time job expecting him back on Monday. David had promised to see Jessica that same weekend. On Thursday, March 25th, a formal missing person report was finally filed with the Arizona State Attorney General's office. The case was assigned to Assistant District Attorney John Mendoza, no relation to Chris Miller, who immediately ordered investigators to trace the group's last confirmed movements. The initial focus was on San Diego. Investigators contacted the Ocean View Inn where the boys had reserved rooms. The hotel manager, Robert Salinas, confirmed the reservation for 5 nights, but said the group had never checked in. Their booking was automatically canceled on Tuesday, March 16th, when they failed to show. Detectives also checked phone records. The last documented call from any of the four was David's 9:30 p.m. conversation with Jessica on Sunday, March 14th. After that, none of the cell phones showed any activity. Over the following weeks, the families organized search parties. They drove the entire stretch of Interstate 8 from Phoenix to San Diego, stopping at every gas station, diner, and roadside motel. They plastered missing person posters on light poles, bus stops, and shopping centers. The most widely circulated photo was a group shot taken in February 2004, showing the four friends smiling in the university cafeteria. By early April, local news stations began covering the story. A regional program called Missing in the Southwest dedicated a full segment to the case, interviewing the families and airing the gas station footage from Gila Bend. The media attention generated several tips, but none led anywhere. By May 2004, investigators began to consider whether the boys had been victims of organized crime. That year, cartel activity along the Arizona-California border was on the rise, and there were rumors of young people disappearing after being in the wrong place at the wrong time. A private investigator hired by Chris's father suggested the boys might have been kidnapped by criminal groups. The theory gained traction because there was no evidence of a car accident, and the Honda Civic itself had never been found. Throughout the summer of 2004, there were multiple alleged sightings of the boys in different parts of the Southwest. A woman in Las Vegas claimed she saw Ryan working at a restaurant. A family in Tijuana reported seeing David at a street market. But each lead, when checked by authorities, turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. By June, Michael's parents had returned to Holbrook, keeping in touch with the other families as best they could. Their limited finances made it impossible to stay in Phoenix indefinitely, and the uncertainty was taking a serious toll on their health. Michael's father, a lifelong rancher, began showing signs of severe depression. Jessica, David's girlfriend, took a semester off from college to help with the search. She temporarily moved to Phoenix and became the unofficial coordinator for the families. Her dedication was remarkable, but it came at a cost. She lost weight, barely slept, and lived in constant anxiety. In August 2004, exactly 1 year after the four had met at Arizona State University, a memorial mass was held at Phoenix's St. Mary's Basilica. Over 200 people attended, family, classmates, professors, and neighbors, all praying for the boys' safe return. By 2005, the second year of their disappearance, search efforts intensified. Families hired divers to explore lakes and reservoirs along the route to San Diego. Search teams combed remote desert areas, working off theories that the car might have gone off-road somewhere desolate. In October 2005, a burned-out red car was found in a canyon near Yuma. For a brief moment, hope and dread collided. But when investigators ran the VIN, it wasn't Chris's Honda Civic. The discovery led nowhere, except to remind the public about the case that was slipping from headlines. The years 2006 and 2007 were especially hard on the families. The official investigation had stalled, and the money for private investigators was running out. Chris's parents finalized their divorce in 2006, a decision long in the making but pushed over the edge by the grief and strain. Mary Ellen, Ryan's mother, developed an almost obsessive routine. Every weekend, she drove alone along different highways across Arizona and into Southern California, stopping in remote towns, showing strangers her son's picture, and asking if anyone had seen him. Her family worried about her mental health, but she refused to sit at home and do nothing. In 2007, the case was reassigned to a new assistant district attorney, Carmen Rodriguez, who decided to re-examine the entire investigation from the beginning. Her approach was different from her predecessors. Instead of focusing primarily on organized crime theories, she went back to the basics, reconstructing the final days before the boys disappeared. She interviewed classmates, professors, and employers again, and that's when new details surfaced. One classmate recalled Chris mentioning he knew someone in San Diego, though he never gave specifics. Another remembered David asking around about summer jobs along the coast. A professor even recalled David mentioning he might stay near the beach if something promising came up. This directly contradicted earlier statements claiming the trip was purely recreational. In March 2008, exactly 4 years after the disappearance, a candlelight vigil was held at the Gila Bend gas station, the last confirmed place the boys had been seen. The families placed a memorial plaque there with the 4 young men's photos and names. The gas station owner, moved by the story, agreed to let the plaque remain permanently. During the vigil, an older man approached the families. He introduced himself as Aurelio Gomez, a truck driver who had been at the gas station on March 15, 2004. Aurelio remembered seeing the boys, but also something else. He recalled 2 men sitting in a white pickup truck on the far side of the lot, watching the boys closely. His description was vague, but enough to spark new interest. One man was tall and thin, with a mustache, wearing a plaid shirt. The other was shorter, stockier, wearing a baseball cap. The truck was an older white Ford, late 90s model. Investigators reviewed the old 2004 gas station footage again. The image quality was poor, but sure enough, a white pickup could be seen parked in the distance. The occupants, however, were not clearly visible. From 2008 to 2015, the case gradually faded from public attention. The families carried on with life, but never stopped hoping. Mary Ellen continued running the family's small grocery store, but her employees often noticed her staring at the front door as if waiting for Ryan to walk in. Michael's parents aged quickly. His father developed diabetes. His mother began showing early signs of memory loss. In 2010, they sold the last of their cattle and moved into a small apartment in Holbrook. Jessica, David's girlfriend, finished her degree in 2009 but never married. She worked as an engineer in Yuma, staying in regular contact with the families. Every year on March 15th, she visited the memorial plaque at the Gila Bend gas station, leaving flowers for David. Chris's family fell apart entirely. His father relocated to San Diego for work and rarely returned to Phoenix. His mother became increasingly withdrawn before eventually moving in with her sister in Tucson. In 2012, there was a brief flicker of hope. An inmate at Arizona State Prison claimed to know what happened to the 4 boys. He said they had been recruited by a cartel to smuggle drugs into the U.S., but when investigators checked, they discovered the man had been in prison since 2003, before the boys had even vanished. It was just another dead end. Then, on Sunday afternoon, October 7th, 2018, something extraordinary happened. Jessica was at home in Yuma, scrolling through Facebook, when she received a friend request. The account name was Michael Ruiz. The profile photo was blurry, but the name stopped her cold. The account had been created only 2 days earlier, on October 5th. No posts, no friends. The only information listed was, studied at Arizona State University. Jessica's hands trembled as she accepted the request. Almost immediately, a private message appeared. Jessica, this is Michael. I know it's hard to believe, but you need to know David is dead. Ryan and Chris, too. I'm the only one left. I can't explain everything yet, but please, tell the families. Don't go to the police. Not yet. There are things I need to handle first. Jessica read the message 3 times before she could even breathe. Her first thought was that it had to be a cruel hoax. But something about the tone. It didn't feel random. She wrote back, "If you're really Michael, tell me something only he would know about David." 2 hours later, a reply came. David had a scar on his left knee from a bicycle accident when he was 8. He told you about it when you 2 went to the beach in San Diego back in December 2003. He also told you he wanted to get a master's degree in environmental engineering because he cared about pollution in the Colorado River. Jessica felt the room spinning. It was all true, every detail. David had told her those things, privately, personally, information only someone close to him could possibly know. She immediately called Mary Ellen, Ryan's mother. The call was chaotic, Jessica trying to explain, Mary Ellen torn between hope and disbelief. "Are you sure it's real?" she kept asking. "How do we know this isn't someone trying to hurt us?" Mary Ellen contacted the other families. By Sunday night, October 7th, every parent knew about the message. The decision not to involve the police right away was agonizing, but in the end, they agreed to follow the instructions. On Monday, October 8th, Jessica sent another message to Michael's account. "The families are desperate. Where have you been all these years? What happened to all of you?" The reply came that evening, Tuesday, October 9th. "Jessica," the message began, "what I'm about to tell you is hard to believe, but it's the truth. We were kidnapped on the highway near Yuma. They took us to a remote place in the mountains. We were forced to work on marijuana plantations. David died in 2006 from illness. There were no medicines. Ryan died in 2009 trying to escape. Chris died in 2012 in a shootout between rival groups. I escaped 2 years ago, but I've been hiding because I fear for my life." The messages from Michael kept coming over the following weeks. Each conversation revealed more details about 14 years of captivity. According to him, the 4 young men had been intercepted by a criminal group that mistook them for members of a rival gang. By the time they realized the mistake, it was too late to release them without consequences. Michael described life in the camps with detail that was both convincing and horrifying. Forced labor from dawn to dusk, failed escape attempts, the deaths of his friends one by one. But soon, inconsistencies began creeping in. When Jessica asked about specific memories from college, Michael sometimes gave vague or incorrect answers. When Mary Ellen asked what Ryan's favorite food was, Michael replied, "Tacos al pastor." But Mary Ellen knew her son loved cheesesteak sandwiches, not tacos. On October 25th, Jessica asked a test question. "Michael, do you remember the nickname David gave you in college?" The reply, "He called me skinny because I was so thin." But Jessica knew that wasn't true. David had always called Michael engineer because he was constantly scribbling calculations in his notebooks. Her doubts grew stronger when she requested a recent photo. "I can't send pictures," Michael wrote, "because the people after me could trace me. But I can do a video call, if you block your number." The video call never happened. Each time Jessica or the families suggested meeting in person, Michael came up with excuses. His story grew increasingly elaborate, filled with details about cartel operations that sounded straight out of movies or TV series. Finally, in November 2018, the families decided to involve law enforcement. The case was assigned to the Arizona State Attorney General's office, specifically the Special Division for Missing Persons. A digital forensics team began analyzing the Facebook messages. Their findings were unsettling. The account had been created from an IP address in Phoenix, not from some remote mountain region as claimed. The writing style and vocabulary didn't match Michael Ruiz's educational background or rural upbringing. Even more disturbing, the IP address traced back to a public computer at an internet cafe in downtown Phoenix, just a few blocks from where Ryan had lived before vanishing. Cafe records showed the computer was used by a man in his 40s who always paid cash and never gave his real name. Security cameras captured a grainy image of him. Medium build, graying hair, a face partly obscured by a baseball cap. Investigators noted he had been visiting the cafe regularly since 2016, always using different computers, always paying in cash. Police expanded their search to nearby security cameras. One clip showed the man leaving the cafe and climbing into a white pickup truck. The image was blurry, but the truck's shape and color matched the one truck driver Aurelio Gomez had described seeing near the boys at the gas station back in 2004. Digital forensics dug deeper. Before creating the Michael Ruiz account, The same IP address had repeatedly searched for information about the missing boys: full names, family details, old newspaper articles. The searches went back as far as 2016. Some of the terms included Jessica Collins Yuma, Mary Ellen Thompson Phoenix, and 2004 Missing Students Arizona. Former ADA Carmen Rodriguez, who had handled the case years earlier, was brought in to review the new evidence. Her insight proved critical. She noticed the online searches spiked right after the families renewed their search efforts. In March 2016, 12 years after the disappearance, the families had held a march in downtown Phoenix. The first wave of searches came 3 days later. In March 2017, when the families gave new interviews to local media, another spike followed. Whoever was behind this had been monitoring the families' movements, waiting for the right moment to reach out. But why wait until 2018? The answer surfaced when investigators reviewed old news archives. In August 2018, a local paper had reported the case was about to be permanently closed due to lack of leads. The article was dated August 15th, exactly 51 days before the Michael Ruiz account was created. Forensic linguists analyzed every message. The Spanish used was far too polished for someone allegedly isolated in the mountains for 14 years. Michael Ruiz had grown up in rural Arizona. His real writing style had been simpler, more direct. The messages also contained cultural references that didn't fit. In one, the writer claimed to have only recently heard about Netflix, even though by 2018 streaming was common knowledge, even in small towns. Metadata revealed the account had been typed on a computer using a Spanish keyboard setting common in Mexico, but with hints of dialect from outside the region, another red flag. Psychological profilers studied the messages and concluded the impersonator knew intimate details about the families, suggesting close access at some point or long-term observation. Choosing Jessica instead of the parents made sense, too. She had been the most emotionally involved, the most vocal in keeping the case alive. Reaching out to her first would guarantee the strongest reaction. And the timing, the contact happening just as the case was about to be closed, was no coincidence. October 2018 marked the 14th anniversary of the disappearance, a time when the families were emotionally vulnerable, desperate for answers. In December 2018, the investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives thoroughly examined the employee records of the internet cafe where the Facebook messages had originated. The place, called Cyber World, had been operating since 2003 and kept detailed logs of its regular customers. The owner, Raul Castaneda, remembered the man clearly. He was quiet, Raul said. Always asked for the computer in the back corner, the one farthest from the entrance. Paid in cash. Never spoke to anyone else. Raul recalled something else. The man had started visiting shortly after Raul's wife had put up a missing persons poster in 2016. She'd known one of the families and wanted to help keep the case alive. That man always stared at the poster before logging on, Raul said. Investigators asked Raul to work with a forensic artist to produce a composite sketch. The result, a man in his mid-40s, graying hair, mustache, heavy build. The resemblance to the description truck driver Aurelio Gomez had given back in 2004 was chilling. The sketch was distributed across law enforcement agencies in Arizona. 3 days later, a highway patrol officer in Yuma recognized the man. Sergeant Lopez had been stationed there for 15 years and remembered seeing this same man often, always alone, always driving a white pickup, always lingering near the gas station where the boys had last been seen. Lopez noted he often appeared around the anniversaries when the families visited to leave flowers at the memorial plaque. Investigators re-reviewed all gas station surveillance footage, not just from the day of the disappearance, but from the years that followed. What they found was terrifying. The same white pickup appeared in nearly every anniversary video, parked where it had a clear view of the families while remaining hard to spot. In January 2019, after 3 months of digging, detectives traced the truck through highway camera records. The license plate led to a man named Aurelio Santana Vega, 47 years old, with a criminal record for small-scale drug trafficking. He lived on an isolated ranch about 12 miles from where the students had vanished. When police secured a search warrant for the property, what they found confirmed their worst fears. One room in the house was a shrine dedicated to the missing students. Newspaper clippings covered the walls, photos of the families, detailed maps of their homes, workplaces, and daily routines. There were even long-lens photographs, Mary Ellen at her grocery store in Phoenix, Jessica leaving work in Yuma, Michael's parents outside their small apartment in Holbrook. Aurelio had been watching them for years. And then came the diary. Page after page documenting the family's lives, where they went, who they spoke to, when they traveled. Notes dating back 5 years. On January 15, 2019, 14 years and 10 months after the boys vanished, Aurelio Santana Vega was arrested. For the first 12 hours of interrogation, he denied everything, claiming he was simply interested in the case like everyone else. But when confronted with the Facebook records, the shrine, the photographs, his story cracked. What he confessed next stunned even veteran detectives. He and his younger brother, Joaquin Santana Vega, had intercepted the students on March 15, 2004, near Yuma. Their original plan wasn't to kidnap. They meant to steal the car and any cash the boys had. But when they recognized us after the robbery, Aurelio said, Joaquin said we couldn't let them go. They'd go straight to the cops. So they took the boys to the ranch, holding them in an abandoned outbuilding until they could figure out what to do. It spiraled quickly. The boys were terrified. Some tried to escape. Aurelio, voice barely above a whisper, described what happened next. David Collins died first, in April 2004, less than a month after they disappeared. He'd been injured during an escape attempt, developed a severe infection. With no medical help, it spread fast. He died in agony, buried in a shallow grave in the mountains. Ryan Thompson died in July 2004. He had been the loudest, demanding release, threatening they'd be found. During one heated confrontation, Joaquin snapped, hitting him with a farming tool. It killed him instantly. Chris Miller lasted until September 2004. He'd tried a different approach, gaining their trust, offering to help around the ranch. For a while it worked. He was given slightly better treatment, but when he used that trust to plan an escape, Joaquin caught him. Chris didn't survive. Michael Ruiz was the last. By November 2004, he was withdrawn, barely speaking, barely eating. Aurelio claimed he found Michael dead one morning, insisting it was natural causes, but investigators believed he had taken his own life after watching his friends die one by one. When asked why he created the fake Facebook account in 2018, Aurelio gave a chilling answer. Joaquin died in 2015, he said. Lung cancer. Before he died, he made me promise to tell the families what happened, said he couldn't leave this world carrying that secret. But Aurelio had been unable to face the families directly. For 3 years after his brother's death, he wrestled with guilt and fear. Creating a fake identity, he confessed, seemed like a way to keep his promise without facing the legal consequences. I thought if I pretended to be Michael, he said, I could give them some peace. Tell them their sons had died, but one survived. I thought that would be better than them never knowing. Forensic psychologists later said Aurelio's motives reflected a disturbing mix of guilt, narcissism, and a twisted sense of compassion. By creating the illusion that Michael had survived, he allowed himself to feel as though he was helping the families, while avoiding the full weight of his crimes. With Aurelio's confession, authorities immediately launched search teams to recover the students' remains. He provided approximate burial locations, but after 15 years, environmental conditions and erosion made the searches difficult. In February 2019, they found the first body, David Collins, exactly where Aurelio had indicated, in the mountains near Yuma. Dental records confirmed his identity, and the cause of death matched Aurelio's account. A month later, in March 2019, they found Ryan Thompson. His skull confirmed death by blunt force trauma, just as described. His parents buried him 15 years after he vanished. In April 2019, Chris Miller was located. His remains were better preserved thanks to soil conditions in the area where he'd been buried. The search for Michael Ruiz took longer. His body was finally recovered in May 2019, buried deeper and more carefully than the others. Aurelio said he'd done this because Michael had caused the least trouble of the group. The revelations shattered the families, yet also gave them closure after 15 years of anguish. Mary Ellen, Ryan's mother, described it as closing a book that had been left open for far too long. "The pain of losing my son will never go away," she said in an interview after the trial. "But the not knowing was worse. At least now I can mourn him properly." Michael's parents returned to Phoenix for the first time in a decade to claim their son's remains. The reunion with the other families was heartbreaking, but also filled with solidarity born from years of shared suffering. Jessica, who had first received the fake messages, felt both relief and guilt. "I feel so foolish for believing, even for a moment, that David might still be alive," she said. "But I'm grateful we finally have the truth." Chris's family, fractured by years of uncertainty, tried to reunite for his funeral, but the emotional wounds ran too deep to fully heal. Aurelio Santana Vega's trial began in August 2019. It became one of the most closely followed cases in Arizona's recent history, not just because of the brutality of the murders, but because of the psychological torment he inflicted on the families for years afterward. He pled guilty to 4 counts of murder, plus kidnapping, psychological torture, and identity fraud. His defense claimed he acted under his brother Joaquin's influence, painting Joaquin as the true mastermind. But prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that Aurelio had been a willing, active participant. Investigators discovered he had continued visiting the burial sites for years, even after Joaquin's death. In October 2019, Aurelio Santana Vega was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences, plus 30 additional years for the other crimes. He would never leave prison. At sentencing, Aurelio addressed the families. "I know there's no forgiveness for what I've done," he said, voice shaking. "I know I destroyed your lives, and your children's lives. All I can say is, I'm sorry, even if those words mean nothing now." None of the families responded. The case of the 4 missing students became a symbol of the violence haunting the Southwest in the early 21st century. But it also highlighted the power of family persistence and the critical role of technology. The same digital tools Aurelio used to torment the families through fake Facebook messages were the tools investigators later used to expose him. The case became a model for training detectives in advanced forensic techniques. The families established a foundation in memory of the 4 young men, the Ryan, Michael, Chris, and David Foundation, to support other families of the missing. Jessica never married but found purpose in the foundation's work. "David would have wanted us to help others," she often said. "We can't bring them back, but we can make sure other families don't suffer in silence like we did." The gas station in Yuma, where the boys were last seen, became an informal memorial site. The owner kept the plaque the families had installed years earlier and added a small garden dedicated to all the missing. The case showed how grief can take unexpected forms and how technology can both harm and heal. The family's persistence and the investigators' dedication ultimately uncovered the truth, even though it was far more painful than anyone had imagined.